Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews in Washington. American history has showcased leaders commanding the moral authority needed to face this country's long challenges. Abraham Lincoln opposed the expansion of slavery and won the war that ended it. FDR stood firm against Hitler and saved the world from fascism. Martin Luther King marched for civil rights and ultimately sacrificed his life for it. And Presidents Truman, Kennedy, and Reagan had to resolve to avert catastrophe during the Cold War. Their moral authority helped this country survive and prevail. Now, however, we find ourselves without it. The dual attacks of this weekend raised the question of whether we can address gun violence and the rising threat of white nationalism. Trump's official response was a scripted speech he read Monday from a teleprompter in the diplomatic room of the White House. Trump recited the kinds of words condemning white supremacy and hate killings that the president should say in the wake of such a tragedy. But they were words he could not credibly deliver nor be taken to heart. As the Washington Post points out, that unifying message stood in stark contrast to more than 2.5 years of name-calling, demonization, demonizing minorities, and inflaming racial animus. Trump's speech came on Monday after a visit to his golf club in New Jersey, where he spent part of the weekend complaining to allies and club members of the golf resort about media coverage that seemed to blame him for the shootings. According to this report in the Post, senior policy advisor Stephen Miller led the effort to draft the speech he gave on Monday, and White House aides talked to Trump about what he would say and how his tone should be presidential. But as he often does, the president spoke more candidly on Twitter, where he blamed the media and attacked President Obama. Meanwhile, the president heads tomorrow to El Paso and Dayton. I'm joined now by Yamiche Alcindor, White House correspondent with the PBS NewsHour. Jason Johnson's politics editor of The Root. Bret Stephens is an op-ed columnist at the New York Times. Thank you all for joining us. There's a Jekyll and Hyde aspect to this. But clearly, what is credible, Yamiche, is the Trump on tweet. The one he tweets out. What a great word, tweet. At 6:30 in the morning, when most people are still asleep. That's Trump. This guy reading a teleprompter I love it, in the diplomatic room. In other words, the room where you have to be diplomatic. Your thoughts? Who's the real guy?
I'll say this. The great Toni Morrison that died today said, if you can only be tall if someone else is on your knees, then you have a serious problem. And there are people all across this country who think the president has a serious problem, likely shown on Twitter, which is that he wants to demonize other people. He wants to make immigrants the scapegoats. I just came back from Dayton, Ohio, where people there are pointing to his rhetoric to say not only is he creating divisions in our own community, but he's also, in his inaction in gun reform and passing gun legislation, he is creating these societies and creating this atmosphere that is making us all unsafe. I think, yes, the president definitely changed his tone and condemned white nationalism, but he said nothing of how his own words could have contributed to this unstable individual going and killing so many people in El Paso. He could have said, look, people think I'm talking to white nationalists. I'm not doing that. People think that when I say immigrants are invading this country that you should then go out and shoot them. I'm not doing that. He could have made it so much more personal, and he didn't do that. And part of that is because he doesn't want to be tied to this thing, but it's hard for him to be credible on this topic because the people that I've talked to all across this country just don't see him as a moral authority for all sorts of reasons, including the fact that he's added to this atmosphere.
Well, Jason, of course, he never used the word I in that scripted remarks. He didn't blame. He said guns kill people, not people. He did anything he could to relieve guns of any moral responsibility, obviously. And he didn't mention the fact that it was the Latino community that was targeted, that there was an ethnic piece to this, a racial piece.
No.
Never mentioned it.
Because the president doesn't care, Chris. At his core, I don't think he cares. He only cares about these things to the degree that they reflect on him. And your sort of key thing, which is the real Trump? We all know who the real Donald Trump is. That's the guy who gets in front of crowds in Cincinnati.
So why did he do this phony baloney thing yesterday?
Because he has people who advise him who say you have to at least pretend that you care about how to do this job. He wasn't his typical funny, witty, engaging self. We know what he's like. He looks like he's making a hostage video, and he has that odd
except for
that he does.
He had the fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed to sort of keep himself concentrated and motivated. And here's the problem, Chris. At the end of the day, when you don't have any sort of moral authority at the top of a country, it makes it difficult for anyone else to act on the problems that are there. The Republicans feel like they're stymied because they don't have moral leadership from the president. The Democrats have to waste time criticizing the president and then enacting their own policies. We don't have leadership right now in this country. That's why some of these issues are so difficult to tackle.
Let me go to Bret Stephens on this question, because even Bill Clinton, with his limited, some on the moral front, he had some problems, to be honest about it. But, you know, when we had Oklahoma City and he went down there and talked for the country, people believed it. They felt, you know, at least on a lot of levels, Bill Clinton's a good guy. He may have some problems, but he's a good guy. And on this issue of caring about the country, caring about how the government was attacked of the American people, because it was the government of the American people, he was credible. Morally credible, I thought.
He was morally credible. I remember George W. Bush downtown in Manhattan in the days right after 9/11, or even going back to the Reagan administration after the Challenger disaster, the killing of our Marines in Beirut. Presidents in history have always been able to rise to the occasion and to unite the country beyond partisanship. Trump is uniquely unable to do so because from the very beginning, not just of his presidency, but of his candidacy, he's been demonizing multiple racial and ethnic groups. It began with the birtherism. It continued with the assault on Latin American immigrants when he announced his candidacy in 2015. I'll never forget the way he characterized Judge Gonzalo Curiel as unfit to be a judge simply for being Mexican-American, his assaults on Muslim Americans. So all of this has a cumulative impact, which is why the statements that he read from the teleprompter the other day seem so weightless, so insincere, and so contrived, and why you can bet, just as he did after Charlottesville, that pretty soon we're going to hear from the real Donald Trump communicating to his following, to a base that doesn't entirely mind the assault, not the violent assault, but the rhetorical assault on Latin American immigrants, on Mexican-American citizens.
Right.
I think he's going to circle around again like other people have done, but he's particularly good at it. Trump is attacking former President Obama now after Obama yesterday called on Americans to soundly reject language coming out of the mouths of those of any of our leaders that feeds a climate of fear and hatred. In response, President Trump tweeted a quote from Brian Kilmeade of Fox News saying, "Did George Bush ever condemn President Obama after Sandy Hook? President Obama had 32 mass shootings during his reign. Not many people said Obama's out of control. Mass shootings were happening before the president even thought about running." Well, let's talk about the idiocy of this thing. First of all, he claims as an intellectually higher authority, a commentator on Fox. It doesn't embarrass him. He's not quoting Rudyard Kipling. He's not even just some character speaks better than he does. And he acknowledges in his words. And he hates Obama. He's never gotten over what Obama said about him at that White House Correspondents' Dinner and made fun of him because of the idiocy of what he was doing professionally.
Well, there are so many people who see President Trump as just grasping for the legacy of President Obama and is still angry at the fact that he isn't beloved in the way that he thinks President Obama was, and frankly, in the way that President Obama was to a lot of people. He's still grasping for this idea that even though he won the 2016 election, nobody was really there praising him or excited about him.
Obama won 2 majority votes of the American people. Small point.
Exactly.
But he won both popular majorities. Okay.
We can all go back to the first scandal of this presidency, which is that he was trying to claim that his inauguration was bigger than Obama's. From the very beginning, he's had this kind of this rhetorical thing that he has to continue to do.
Does it bother that Obama's black? To be blunt, I mean, we've watched this guy's pattern. Excuse me, it wasn't.
I mean, here's the thing:
does that bother him?
He kicked off his political career, his political life, by saying Obama wasn't born in this country. So I think there's a problem there with him personally with President Obama. I don't know if it's because he's black. Maybe Jason can say that, but it's definitely because
maybe
he obviously.
But I don't think it's an odd question. He seems to be really bugged by this guy.
It infuriates Donald Trump for anybody to be more popular or more beloved than him, and he really has never been able to deal with the fact that, one, like you said, Chris, that Obama made fun of him, but that this black guy has gotten all the love, all the appreciation, even from the same New York elites that used to like Donald Trump in a way that he hasn't.
Guess who's moving to New York, by the way?
Who's moving?
Barack Obama.
Well, exactly.
It's going to drive him
crazy.
Make it worse.
Exactly. He'll be in his own neighborhood.
And, by the way, guess who has a lot of money now? Barack Obama. Anyway, I'm not going to belittle the conversation, but it is kind of delightful anyway. And by the way, I think it bothers him that Obama has moral superiority to him.
Completely.
For a guy that's invested around a lot in his life, and I'm not knocking it per se, because a lot of people do, and I don't like it. But the fact is, Barack Obama has been an upstanding husband, father, has done every single thing morally right in his life, it seems, in terms of public life. It must bug him. Anyway, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's ignoring demands to call the Senate into session from its vacation to vote on gun safety measures, which have already passed the House this year, passed both measures. And while he says he's prepared to address the recent mass murders in a bipartisan way, that'll be a first, NBC notes that his statement made no mention of any timeline to do so, and it didn't mention the word guns. McConnell's also facing criticism for his re-election campaign's attempt this weekend at a partisan joke. His campaign tweeted out an image of several tombstones, there they are, including the one bearing the name of his Democratic opponent in next year's election, even while the news of the El Paso attack was breaking. Bret Stephens, bad editorial judgment here to put tombstones out in a whatever, some sort of email message to your followers right after a mass killing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, some PR flack should get fired. It was idiotic, but it's also the significant point is that it's not just idiotic; it's emblematic. You have a Senate, you have a Republican Congress that has been absolutely unwilling to move on even the most basic steps for common sense gun control to prevent the fact that a shooter can kill 9 people and injure many more in the space of the 30 seconds that it takes to stop him. And the Senate Majority Leader is not prepared to lift a finger to even try to check that. Even the governor of Ohio and former Senator Governor DeWine is prepared to act. But it's extraordinary that the Republican Party has put up such a wall of opposition to minimal movement, and that Trump, quite frankly, hasn't had so much, even had the political common sense to understand that he could make real headway and be a useful president for a change by getting behind some of the basic gun control laws that he himself suggested he might support, like bans on bump stocks after the Parkland shootings. So this is McConnell in his.
But you know why, Brett? You study ideology. He has to carry all the way to the farthest right. He can't give away he doesn't have enough angry white people to give away any of them.
Right.
I mean, just numerically, he needs all the way to the farthest reaches of fascism. He needs to reach them all to get his 46 or 47% he can win the Electoral College.
Correct. And Senator McConnell is now facing a credible challenger in the Senate. He's unpopular in Kentucky. And he imagines that the only way he's going to win is with a base play that completely ignores the needs of the country, so that he can have the support of the NRA and other aspects of the gun lobby. The problem is that we're living in a country in which thousands of people are being killed because there's insufficient gun regulation, and in which the number of mass shootings just seems to be rising geometrically, if not exponentially.
Well, the president and his allies continue to propose solutions that ignore the essential reality of guns. How about mentioning guns in mass shootings? They play a role. For instance, the president yesterday blamed video games.
We must stop the glorification of violence in our society. This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace.
That's the president reading something that was thrown at him. Some people said he was sight reading. He never read it before. In addressing the mass shootings on his website, former Arkansas Governor, wait till you get this one, Huckabee, said, the lack of thought and prayers is probably the single biggest factor in what is behind them. That's about the shootings. And Fox Sean Hannity proposed installing armed guards in every public building. In other words, that there aren't enough guns out there, enough already. Let's watch him.
I have been calling for a long time. Every school, secure the perimeter of those schools. Equip them with retired police and military. They should be on every floor of every school. We could do that with stores. We can do that in malls. We can do that pretty much anywhere the public is. Courthouses, we can expand that out everywhere. Have one armed guard on every floor of every school, all over every mall, the perimeter and inside every hall of every mall.
My God, he's AOC. Everybody works today.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a full employment program. Every floor of every school, of every department store. This is a job for everybody.
Yeah, I love this police
jobs.
state. This police state that basically Sean Hannity is calling for everybody to have. So there's several problems with this. Number one,
you'll have as many guards as teachers.
Right, exactly.
And they may make as much.
They're probably being paid better. So there's so many issues with this.
Okay, let's get back. I've got to get back to Huckabee. Would you take on Huckabee? I mean, this is what Sodom and Gomorrah is causing our problems. I mean, I don't know, but in the secular square where we talk about things, why does he come up with this stuff?
I mean, one, obviously, because it's part of who he is. His core thing is to put Christianity and to put his religion at the forefront of things. And there are people that think more love, more Christianity would help. But I should tell you, I interviewed Anthony Reynolds. This was a man who was 10 feet away from the shooter in Dayton. And the thing that he said coming out of that was he shouldn't be able to have this gun that I saw him kill people with. When you talk to people who are now living through this, they say the thing that scared me more was the gun. It was the idea that someone can have an ammunition with 100 rounds of ammunition and kill all these people. 24 seconds, 30 seconds, and 9 people are dead. That's incredible. And I think that that's what most people want to be focused on, especially the people that I've been talking to who survived these mass shootings.
Thank you so much. Take care. Toni Morrison today.
I know. I cried all day about this.
So many great heroes.
A genius.
Anyway, thank you, Yamiche Alcindor. Thank you, Jason Johnson. And thank you, Bret Stephens. Coming up.